the first thing I've got to say is just a bit of a clearing. You've got to bear with me. I openly talk about this. I suffer incredibly from anxiety, social anxiety. And walking into a space like this today, as amazing as it is, it really gets my system up. And for me, trying to catch my breath at the moment and just kind of try and find some calm so I can hopefully share some knowledge with you guys is taking me a few minutes or so. So bear with me as I start to warm up, if that's okay. And if I take a moment of dramatic silence, it's probably me just kind of finding myself for a second and getting my heart rate down and my system down. Second bit of housekeeping is do not put your phones on silent. Turn your phones off. Once you've turned your phones off, please put your phones to the side of the room, along the side of a wall, either there, at the front, or on the side. Off you go. Goes for you too, Yoga Hood. Yeah? You know where I'm going with this, right? You know? Woo. Who's twitching already? Yeah? It's a discussion point. I think you already probably know where I'm going to go with this. So let me introduce myself. My full name, for the sake of Phoebe, we'll share this. My full name is Chevy Rough. We are of the muck roughs, apparently. We originated in Scotland. When we moved down to England, we dropped the muck, thankfully. Could have been worse. They did want to call me Stingray Rough at first. But my mum, bless her, put her foot down, and Chevy Rough it was. So I go by the name of Chevy Rough. These days, I also go by the handle of the Mindful Mover. I am a run coach and I'm a run, movement, and mindfulness coach. I am also founder of the ChasingLights Collective, who are a running community that has evolved into something more, and that's something that we will talk about further in the talk. So today, what's my intention from today? I never curate things. I'm always in practice of going left of right, experimenting, trying to find new conversations, trying to challenge myself and evolve my thoughts and my mindset of where the fitness community, fitness space is. And within this space today, I don't have the answers. But what I like to try and do is create a discussion and for us to talk about our relationship with movement. And within that, just share between each other. So I've probably got about 20 minutes of talk in me. The rest has got to be a two-way conversation. So please don't be afraid to put your hand up. We will do points where we ask questions. I'm going to ask you guys to share back with me, but it only works if it is a two-way conversation. So please help me. Otherwise, I just fall down the rabbit hole of all kinds of chatter. So I suppose the purpose of the talk is to have a conversation about movement and mindfulness and how we can connect the dots between mind and body to build a long-term and healthy relationship with our practice of choice, whether that's going for a walk, whether that's jogging, whether that's running, whether that's yoga, whether that's CrossFit, or whatever it may be, and how those lessons that we learn on the road, in the gym, on the mat, translate to a healthier way of living from the 9 to 5. For me to kind of talk about this journey and kind of have this conversation, I'm going to take you a bit of a history lesson and I suppose talk about me. I assure you, and I already talk about the anxiety and stuff like that, I'm not necessarily a big fan of standing up here and shouting about me, but it's the way that I connect with my community, it's the way that I connect with my athletes, it's the way that I connect with the conversation around mental health. It's the way that I basically connect with individuals is by sharing my story and kind of using points within my story as kind of discussion elements of what I'm learning. So, I'm 36 years old, I started in the city. I had a bit of a rough childhood. I think a lot of us do. Things got very shaky at kind of the age of 12, 13. Very, very lost young man. That very, very lost young man went to go work in the city at the age of 17. The square mile is a hard place to work. And if you are a young man who has no voice, who hasn't really had any male role models around him growing up, and if you are suddenly thrown into the lion's den of the city, it isn't going to go well. So I tried to find my voice, and the only way I found my voice and I found my confidence was through alcohol. And that became me. I became a caricature of myself. I have a tattoo across my chest which says, "I am not who I am. I am not the person that I am purveying to the world around me. I am a false image of myself." And the reason I am a false image of myself is because I'm just trying to connect with people. It wasn't about connecting with myself. It was trying to connect and be a version of myself for everyone else, not me. And, when you're with a pack of guys down the pub, and I never really drank, when you're a pack of guys down the pub and, they say to you, "Do you want a pint of Stella?" Never really drank beer, didn't like it. I couldn't say no. I didn't understand, what if they don't like me? I had 101 abandonment issues. I didn't want to say no to men. That's an issue in my past, my history. I couldn't because I didn't want to be rejected. I'd already been rejected in my life. So for me, I started saying yes. Yes to that party, yes to that drink. One drink became 2 drinks, 3 drinks became 4 drinks. One night became 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, 5 nights out a week. And as I started to fall down that rabbit hole, that dark rabbit hole, it was, "Do you want some drugs?" Hell yeah. And then I became best friends with cocaine. And that was my partnership. That was something that drove me in every way and forced me, kind of took me down the path that I went down for near on 13 years. So substance abuse was a way of me hiding, and what I realize now, my depression, my social anxiety, and me just trying to grow from a young man, a boy, into a young man, and now from a young man into a married man. So that's kind of my journey from that perspective. It gets positive, don't worry, guys. But it's important, right? It's this guy standing up in front of you, and it's like he's talking away, and it's kind of me giving you my credentials, where my experience comes from. So from there, I realized I needed to make change. I couldn't keep following this path. It was destroying me. It was crushing relationships around me. A state of living in this gray space continuously, hungover, depressed, come downs. That's how I lived for year in and year out, day in and day out. And I realized I needed to move in a different direction. Now, I'll talk about movement and the concept of movement and the word movement a lot more, and my definition of it. But at the time, it's like I just needed to make change. So I started walking. I started putting one foot in front of the other, and I started hiking. Because if I could get out of town on the weekends, then it gave me something else to do. And that's where I first started to build my relationship with movement. And from there, I started to make considerable change. I started to explore myself. Movement is like therapy. And I started to be able to realize and kind of navigate the path to where I am now. Walking became running. And I wanted to push myself. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted those endorphins that everyone talked about. I needed to feel good about my body. I needed to own my body. Because, I had this negative relationship for so long. All I knew was just, And I wanted to feel good about myself. So let's go for a run. So I started exploring movement from that perspective, speeding things up a little bit. And then I realized I needed connection. I didn't really understand it at the time, but I needed something else because I'd left all my other kind of friendship groups and I had made change and I'd been rejected. And this is the guy with the abandonment issues, and he's being rejected by his social circles, by his friends, because he's choosing to make change, and that took bravery. And it took self-belief. And I realized that I needed to connect, though. I needed something more. And I didn't understand that's what we needed as human beings at the time, because that is one of the most important things. We are tribe-based people, humans. We need to be in a village. So I was blessed. I was going to move out of the country, go to Australia. I was going to run away. Different form of movement, right? And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay. And I went into the gym, and I was looking around in the gym, and there was an introductory to running course. 6 weeks introduction to running by the Urban Running Collective, Run Dem Crew. And I turned up, I thought, let's give it a go. And a very dear friend of mine, my captain, turned up, a chap by the name of Charlie Dark, who I didn't realize was going to be here today, but he is sitting down at the back. I met Charlie, and from there I started to build my relationship with community. And, I don't want to go too much into it, but ultimately, over a 3-year period, I started to find myself. I started to explore a better, newer version of me. And it led me to the point where I decided, I'm going to leave the city. I'm feeling good about myself. Let's not talk about the multitude of injuries, the multitude of races that I dropped out. Because my relationship with movement wasn't necessarily healthy, but the community kept me going. That was the most important thing to my change, not putting the one foot in front of the other. And I finished up I went to the city, and to cut a long story short, 2 years ago, I left, I quit, took out a horrendously large loan, took some of my bonus, went away to the States for 3 months, moving around mountains, and ultimately just tried to find myself and take a bit of a break. And I came back and said, let's do this. Let's help other people explore their movement. That was what I felt I wanted to do. And I had really kind of fallen down the rabbit hole of strength and conditioning and realizing my running needed to be underpinned with everything but running. And I'd gone through hernia surgery. I'd gone into a gym, squatted. That's a whole other story. I was off the road for 18 months. Honestly, my relationship with running has been hell. It really has been. But actually, that's what's led me to this stage. It's moved me in a direction that's led me here, movement. So I quit 2 years ago, came back and went, cool, let's do this. Let's help other people. That's what I feel my path is. That's what I was being pulled towards. And it was all selfish. It is still selfish. But I felt it was a good path for me. So I retrained, personal trainer, run coach, variety of other things. And 18 months ago, I qualified. Within a year, I got a job on a BBC One documentary called Mind Over Marathon. I built a crew, circa of 60, 70 people. We are working on a variety of projects, providing movement, connection, and community to people within the community, those around social initiatives, and that's where I am now, basically. So it's been going well. So the talk today is about mindful movement. What? So first of all, let's talk about the definition of movement. Hands up. Someone give me a definition of movement. What does movement mean to someone of you in this room? Go. Come on, hands up. Pang, go. Progression. Progression. Freedom. Cool. Okay. And let's talk about mindfulness. God, I hate that word. And I am a mindfulness coach. But I'll get to the reason why I use that word. Definition of mindfulness. Go. Being in the moment. Boom. Clarity. Pardon? Aware. No mind. Nice. Okay. What is movement to me? Movement is, and this is the really important thing, when we define our movement, and it's absolutely great, I think we've got some lovely words in here, but when we define our movement within the exercise that we do, we define our movement often by running, or we go do yoga, we lift, and then if we run, how do we define that movement? We define that movement by PBs, by speed, by distance, by medals. If we define our movement within lifting, we define it by how much can we lift? How heavy can we go, bro? Yoga, it's an interesting one with me. I'm still exploring this. But when people are, the conversations that I'm having within yoga, and as I start to explore and look down yoga, people are always looking for that handstand. They're looking for that next progression. We're looking online for influence, and it's a lot of people upside down at the moment. That's my visual representation of yoga. So to me, that's just like running fast or running hard to me. Does that make sense, right? So as we look at this definition of movement, I'm like, okay, let's really start back to basics. Movement for me is just the art of putting one foot in front of the other, whether that's through training or life. Simple as that. And for me, I don't ask people to come run with me anymore, because if I ask people to come run with me, they'll go, I'm not a runner. Cool, don't come run with me, come move with me. Let's just go for a walk. That's movement, right? Why does your movement have to be defined by these numbers, by how fast you can go, by running your fastest mile, by PBs on how much you can lift? Let's break that right down, because as soon as we start benchmarking it here, and we don't make it there, then that's where the internal conversation comes, right? I don't deserve to be moving. I'm not a runner. I'm not a yogi. I'm not a lifter. So let's break down that word movement, and let's just say by the fact that you are out there trying new stuff every day, that you are exploring a new version of you, you are a mover. We are all movers. My mum is a mover. 150 minutes of walking a week increases the likely and better mental health, the equivalent to an antidepressant pill. So actually, if you're exploring the journey of fitness and movement to be a better, happier version of yourself, you can just go for a walk. Cool? Mindfulness. So let's have a real conversation. And once again, you're probably getting a feel for where I'm going with this whole conversation. Let's talk about mindfulness. Companies come to me and they want me to talk about mindfulness. They want me to come and talk to their employees about how to be more mindful in the workplace. Cool. So you want to reduce stress, anxiety, all these kind of aspects. Yeah, cool. What are stress and anxiety byproducts of? Mental health? Or conversations linked to? So the first conversation I have with people when they tell me they want to have a conversation with mindfulness and go, let's get rid of the word mindfulness. What you want me to have a conversation about is mental health. Is your workforce's happiness? Is your workforce's ability to be present? What were some of the definitions we had? Go. Awareness. What was it? Who else? Clarity. Clarity. Thanks. Yes, pleasure. I know, it's okay. I don't just bully people. Being present in your state of mind, yeah? Being here, right now. What do you think that takes? Does it take physical strength? No? Does it take speed? Does it take someone to come around the office and give you a little massage for 10 minutes? Does it take, a company offering you yoga at lunch? No, it takes mental strength. It takes your ability to filter out the noise. And it takes you the ability to want to be able to sit there and listen to your own thoughts. We live in the future, we live in the past, we struggle to live in the present. That's a conversation around mental health. So, when I did this BBC One documentary, Bless, once again with Charlie Dark. If you're in a room with me, we're going to do it. Do you know what I mean? Lucky I'm not going for tears. Do you know what I mean? You're lucky. Yeah, he's got to duck out in a minute. It's charming, isn't it? My captain right there. So what we look at now is so we've understood what my kind of conversation is around movement and mindfulness, right? Mindful movement. So the next thing that I try and look at is helping us understand what kind of movers are we? What fuels our movement? And when I first started out as a coach a couple of years ago, I was like, runners are stressing me out. They are just continuously running hard all the time. And they're running fast, and they're signing up to more marathons, and they're just getting injured, and they have this hate relationship with running. And it's like they're just constantly burning themselves out. So when I came in as a coach, I was like, right, I'm going to be a solution here. I'm going to provide my way up the mountain to help these people. And the conversation that I was having 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, was about running technique, strength and conditioning, mobility. This is what we needed to have a conversation about. Less miles, more holistically everything else. And I was trying to preach that, and I still do. But that was my conversation. Skill and technique, squat more, glute activation, mobility, pull your feet up off the floor, understand position, all these conversations. And then I went on Mind Over Marathon. And so I don't know if has anyone seen Mind Over Marathon? Did anyone see it? Yeah, good. Thank you for watching. So Mind Over Marathon, basically me and a man like Charlie Dark were approached by the BBC. It was a 2-part BBC One documentary presented by Nick Knowles, great guy, by the way, and also involving the royal family. So we spent a lot of time with William, Kate, and Harry. Once again, fantastic. If there's ever a war, I will stand outside the palace. They are great human beings. So we had to take 10 people with mental health issues to the London Marathon. Sure, we could do that. I've only been a coach for a year. There's no problem at all. And we did it. You know, I went in there first of all, and obviously I kind of, you know, it's the BBC. Like, I've got this gig. There are coaches from all, you know, across the UK, people that I respect, watching this, judging me. I've got to go in, like, and my due diligence has got to be on point. And I you know, went in there and I was like, right, this is all the technique stuff, this is the strength and conditioning, this is a spreadsheet for you, I was like, I'm ready. Went in there, met them, week 1, tore it all up, threw it out the window. Never used any of it. And what happened was, and as we know as coaches, and I knew this anyway, got some coaches in here, right? Got some great trainers and coaches. It's 80% here, 20% technical. But what I got the opportunity to do was have like this experiment, this extreme, I was always starting to be interested about why do people run so hard? And I knew that it was an unhealthy connection with why they run, or not an unhealthy connection, but it wasn't about the running technique. The conversation, we keep telling people they've got to do more strength, but there was more to it. We can't address that until we address the emotional. And by going on the journey through Mind Over Marathon, I got to work with kind of extreme ends of the kind of mental health spectrum. You know, we had PTSD, severe depression, severe anxiety. We had various ranges of OCD. Like, we got, you know, wow. You know, so it was like an experiment. It was like a magnifying glass on actually the emotions that I'd gone through with kind of coachees. Is that word right? Yeah, coachees? Yeah, we make that. Go to the mermaid thing, or is that, yeah, cool. So we went, you know, it was like this extreme experiment, and like putting it under the magnifying glass. And it started to have this conversation about fueling our movement. What fuels us? Why are we really looking to make change? So we had a lady by the name of Rianne on the show. And Rianne, 5 years ago, her 1-year-old son passed away with pneumonia. Her husband walked out of the house 4 days later and never came back again. He committed suicide. She had 2 other children. And when Rianne ran, my God, did she run with heart. She was running to be a new version of herself. She was running to leave everything else behind her. With every step that she took was change. She was shedding the emotional weight. She got injured. I saw it coming. But was all the strength and conditioning work, mobility work, do you think that overwrites, or as a coach, telling her to do that, do you think that was going to overwrite that connection she had with the reason why she ran? No. That was stronger than me. That was stronger than me and Charlie. It was stronger than me and the production team who were great. It was stronger than me, Charlie, the production team, the PhD therapists from God knows Oxford University that we had supporting us. It was stronger than that, and the whole community that we had supporting her. And I ran with her, and the reason I'm injured right now 5 months later is because I did a run with her from hospital to hospital, because that was the journey her son was meant to make but never made. It's meant to be 14 miles, it ended up 18 miles. I didn't do the route. And we pushed. And I've ran with a lot of packs, and I've run a lot of people, and to this day is probably a life moment for me that demonstrates the power of running and movement. And it gave me a pure vision and a feel of why we do this and why we're making change. Now, you might think to yourself, what has this got to do with me? Well, let's look at Rianne's story. She suffered a major loss. She was abandoned by her husband. He committed suicide and she lost her baby. All extreme versions of where the mind, and that was why it caused such mental health issues or concerns around PTS. Who's broken up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, changed their hair color, gone shopping for new clothes, started to train? Yeah? So what fueled that movement? Am I making sense? Yeah? That's something that fuels that change. It's not too dissimilar. That's just more of an extreme version of it. We had a lady by a girl named by Poppy. Poppy's a young lady going through change. She would self-sabotage. We would go out for runs and she'd just stop halfway through. The mind just said, I do not want to do this. I can't do this. I'm refusing to do this. She wouldn't commit to putting one foot in front of the other. And I built her as a strong runner. In the gym, she was okay with me, but with the running, she couldn't make that step forward to change. She would literally, the amount of arguments I got in with, if you saw the program, you know Poppy, or that's a South London girl right there. And she just stopped. And it was like, why? Because it was self-sabotage. Why? Because she didn't feel worthy of change. Why? Because every man in her life had told her she shouldn't, and she couldn't, and she does not deserve. So what stopped her movement? That wasn't her being lazy, because that's what we look at sometimes when we look at people who don't run, right? Or we don't move. Is it lazy? No. It's because what fuels her movement is actually holding her back. And I sometimes can off people, and when I get into closer groups, I kind of then say to people, who can look back at relationships in their life from a parent point of view, close friend's point of view, boyfriend, girlfriend point of view, where you have been made to feel a lack of self-worth. And where does that connect with your movement? I'm getting dark and deep again, right? But this is the conversation I have. This is the conversation I have with my community, with my crew. My job is to get people to look at movement and look at what fuels their movement. Because until we can understand what truly drives and fuels your movement, we can't actually make that long-term change. We are so disconnected. We put the headphones in, we go, and I love all the classes that we got here, I genuinely do. But we use fitness as a distraction. And then when we burn out 2 months later, we wonder why. It's because we've used it as a loaded weapon, or we haven't built a genuine connection with why we move. Exploring a journey of fitness, exploring a journey of movement is just a cheap way of going into therapy, but there is just often no one to hold your hand except you. So when you come to the barriers of self-confidence, or when you come to the challenges of being injured, or whatever it may be, you look internally with the self-doubt, or you don't ask the questions that you should be asking of yourself. You blame it on the fact that you're not a runner. You're not designed to lift heavy. I'll never be a yogi. I can never do that. You can do all of it. But you've got to get to the point. This is deep. I need to bring it up a bit. So that's kind of where I talk about mindful movement, is how we start to connect the dots between mind and body. And we can do this from a very simplistic point of view. We need to just start having a conversation with ourselves when we go into movement. The two are not connected. And we can look at this from a real simplistic point of view and how there's a real lack of communication between the two. We think the two are separated. They're not. How often do you have a knee issue and you just ignore it? You got an injury, you got a twinge, you just ignore it. But you're aware, so you think you're having it, but you're not, because you're not listening. So then when you're injured a month later, why do we think that we've stopped? We've had the warning signals, but we don't attend to them. And this is why I talk about this healthy relationship of taking a step back, really understanding a long-term goal, and looking at what in here can stop with down here. So, we're okay? Any questions about that? Any thoughts? Go. Your name is?
My name's John.
Please meet John.
I have a thought about the girl you mentioned earlier about her past relationship.
Yep.
And that it might be true to say that it was her interpretation of her past partnerships of them telling her that she couldn't change.
Yeah.
Perhaps that was her interpretation.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I often get this. I've had, I see this at where people don't run, and I see this a lot. I have a community called Backpackers, and Backpackers I designed a running crew for people at the back of the pack. The elites are fantastic. I love the elites. So, it's brilliant. But I'm really interested about these guys that are doing marathons for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. Being on the road for 3 hours is hard. 2.5 hours is hard. There's a lot that goes into that. Try being on the road when the road sweepers are sweeping you up. What does that do? Try going out to run in a community, because we all need to do that, by the way. We all need to be connected. But the reason we don't go out and run in the community, or the reason we hide in the shadows of a spin class, is because we don't want to be seen. We don't feel like we're valued. We don't feel like we've worth. We don't feel like we belong. And then when you're running, the thing about a running crew versus a spin class is that when everyone turns around, they can see you because they've stopped and you're coming in. That's a hard place to be. So I'm interested in that community. I'm interested in how we elevate them, how they become ambassadors for movement and how they become ambassadors for change. And a lot of the things that I consistently, if we really get down to it, and I'm not a therapist, and I make this really clear, I draw the lines on where my knowledge is, but this is my instincts. And a lot of the issues that I have with people at the back of the pack, a lot of challenges that we face, is because they have not been given confidence. Someone has not told them that they are not worth anything. There has been a lack in that breakdown in a relationship somewhere. And often it's down to partners or parents. I don't want to go down this rabbit, you know what I mean? But no, absolutely. So that's kind of the conversation I have about how can we be a mindful mover. And one of the small practices that I say to people, and one of the starting points that you can really go, is we talk about this element of cooling down before we warm up. When people come into my class or as athletes, they turn up, their energy, their systems are up, right? They've been working all day, stressed out, their head's all over the place, and they turn up to me, or they turn up to a class, and what do we tend to do? Build them up again. The body doesn't understand the difference between work stress, training stress, and life stress from the neck down. It just understands stress. So if you're going to do another stressful class and you've been stressed all day, I'll tell you the reality of this. Is the fact that we think that going to high intensity 4, 5, 3, 6 times a week, or doing this hard load stuff that many times a week, it makes us feel great, the endorphins are rushing. Yeah, and maybe for 2 months it might work, maybe for 3 months it might work. When you're injured and burnt out 3 months later, it hasn't. And this is why I talk about this ongoing healthy relationship. So I talk about this cooling down before we warm up, and I get my guys to do breathing practice before they go for a run. I get them to connect, to ground themselves, to listen to their body, to tune in on what can be holding them back, listen for their injury, listen to what's distracting them, if their head's still in the office, and becoming present. And we're all really scared of this whole kind of meditation and breathing and mindfulness, and I see a lot of people rebelling against it. It's the lowest hanging fruit to happiness and performance. But we're scared of it because it really makes us have a conversation in the here and now. Yeah? And let me tell you something, you don't get better at running by just going out once a week. You go better in running by learning technique, by learning how to move more efficiently, by how you get point A to point B efficiently. Running has a version of reps. You have every rep, and you have to become good in that. But what does that take? Practice. And this is what we forget when we start out on our journeys or in our journeys, and it's like, I don't want to do meditation breathing. I did it once. And sometimes I did. I was going to do it at the beginning of the session, but I just, I kind of held back. I got into it. But, we do it, and our mind goes elsewhere, and it's not for me. That's because you haven't practiced. And that's the thing that I say to becoming a mindful mover is how can you put more practice into your day? How can you down-regulate as opposed to up-regulating? What can you do to be kind to yourself? The second thing that I talk about, once again, I don't have the answers to being a mindful mover. I'm still in this conversation myself. The second thing that I say is show humility. Realize that you know nothing about your mind and body and how it will respond to training stresses. And realize that there are a wealth of people, there's a wealth of YouTube, there's a wealth of knowledge out there. Educate yourself. If someone was to ask you to go in and deadlift the bar, you would look around the room and ask for a coach to help you understand how to lift that bar. Let me tell you something, it's no different from how you squat. You need someone to guide you on how to just squat with body weight. Teaching you how to run, teaching you how to breathe, teaching you how to meditate. These are all practices, and these things take time, and they're not going to give you the immediate rush of endorphins. But if you work at it, you will see the results. Cool? Once again, I wish I could sit up people go, how do I become a mindful mover? I'm still figuring it out myself. But I'm giving you some of the guidelines that I do. The other element that I look at is daily practice. So look at how you're building out your week. So when an athlete comes to me, when someone comes to me from a PT point, from a private tuition point of view, the first thing they say, they want to go on and run a marathon in X time. Cool, okay, brilliant. So what I want you to do is write down how many hours in a night you sleep Monday through Sunday. I want you to tell me how, when you're disconnecting from your phone, how many lunches you go out for a walk, when you're disconnecting from technology, social media, when you're going to sit in a park. I want to know when you're down-regulating and when you're resting and recovering. And if someone says to me, I work in the city, I only get like 5-6 hours sleep, it's really poor. Cool, well, I'm not going to program you any high-intensity work or any hard strength and conditioning work until you resolve your sleep. Simple as that. And once we've got that programmed, once we've built that routine, then we start to add stresses into the life. Sleep is everything. Once we build a program where they can get up out of their bed in the morning and it's not from their alarm and they can spend the first 2 hours of the day without connecting to technology and social media, then I'll talk about training. Because let me tell you, these phones are hell. We still do not understand it. We're all starting to talk about veganism, right? We're all starting to realize, oh my God, actually, maybe we need to have a conversation about dairy, meat, maybe, right? We thought cigarettes were good for us at one point. Let me tell you something, I promise you this, and I don't make many promises. In about 20 years' time, the research that comes out for the effects of social media and this digital connection are going to be huge. Attention spans. Who's got really low attention span? Yeah. So, these are the kind of things that, who's been feeling a bit twitchy while their phone's been over in the corner? Has anyone gone to reach for it at a point? Bits, yeah? That's like crack, right? Like, it's a physical response. So look at your relationships, look at your morning routine, look at your nighttime routine. Okay? That's the next thing that I say. The final two things that I say is two things I say is one, is I want to talk about the need for community. It's all very well moving. It's all very well, I base my principles on movement, connection, and community, by the way. So that's my 3 foundations that I always come back to. The 3 foundations to change, to my version of happiness, to everything that I look for. Movement is great. Put a foot in the right direction. Build a healthy relationship with movement. Connection is what we need more of. We are so disconnected. We do not know our neighbors. We connect through social media, through phones. We feel further and further removed from our families, from our tribes. There is plenty of research that shows you, and I did it with Mind Over Marathon. I didn't build 10 independent runners. I built 10 guys that came together as a community and supported each other through. And that's what I do, is I build communities. So I say to you, what are you doing for you in that sense? Where is your emotional needs being matched? And once again, there's a whole different talk for this kind of thing, and it's not necessarily me. But if you're just in the gym, if you're just plowing high intensity, if you're going from work to this space, to that, and if you're not actually taking a moment to find connection and genuine connection, then the other stuff is really going to be challenged. So I say, look at where you can put that. What community can you join? The final thing that I ask from people is, and I talk about this concept of move it forward. And I like to leave on a final note of asking you to be ambassadors for this. You are part of the, Vince, what's the percentage of people that actually train these days versus the population that don't?
30%.
Yeah, 30%, isn't it? Something like that. So there's like some crazy statistic of, look, when your own crew walk out early, look, take that t-shirt off, give it back. So there's a crazy statistic, like you are part of the top percent of movement. People don't move. People are too scared to. They're too scared to sign up for a marathon. They're too scared. We go back to these original reasons, right? These people are scared to make change. You are falling down the rabbit hole of making change and exploring fitness and exploring movement. You are ambassadors for movement. So what I ask people is, as opposed to signing up to another 6-week intense program, to signing up to another marathon, and I use my runners as an example. It's brilliant. Go out and run a marathon. That's great. And then they sign up for another one. And they sign up for another one. And they sign up for another one. And I'm like, cool, that's more medals in the drawer in 30 years' time. Why don't you take all that knowledge that you've gained, that experience of connecting the dots between mind and body, that understanding of that journey, and why don't you share it with someone who you've inspired along the way? Because you've got friends you probably have friends who've said to you, I wish I could go to a class, or I could go for a run, or I would go and do this, or I would go and do that. How can you move it forward? And that's the concept that my crew, we always look at. How do we take the knowledge and wealth of my crew, and how do we move it forward to people from care, from people with mental health, from people recovering from addiction? Because there is nothing more valuable, and I promise you this, and I actually did this, the guys who ran with my guys at the marathon, so we used some of the people from my crew to pace some of the guys from Mind Over Marathon around. These guys were like heavy elite runners, not elite runners, but like they're quite good, and they run all the time medals. And I kind of wanted to use them as a bit of voodoo. And they all ran around and they said, you know what, that was the best race I've ever run. They'd passed on knowledge, they supported someone else, and they had connected. Take someone from a couch to 5K, take someone to their first spin class. And that human connection will be worth so much more. Move it forward. Thank you for listening. The final thing that I say is that Jake from Mind Over Marathon, who suffered heavily from depression, is now walking around the country for 6 months, doing 6,000 miles. He has become an ambassador for movement. Poppy has left a partner who wasn't great for her, and she has moved to Malta and loving life. Rianne has built a huge foundation for bereavement. She is talking to governments across the UK and Wales about roaming it out even more. Georgie was a detective who tried to commit suicide by throwing herself in the sea. She has now gone back to work and got a promotion. Sam is a guy who used to work in A&R music. He had a real big ego. I got him onto one of the projects that I worked with, Tower Hamlets Kids. He spent the last 8 weeks working with them, because I tell you what, you don't turn up to kids and have that ego. Yeah? He is now going to train as a yoga instructor in India next month. This isn't me blowing my horn. It was a big joint worth, but this is the power of movement. This is the long-term healthy relationship that we built with them for movement, and they have now become ambassadors for movement. So change is out there, and it's amazing where 2 feet can lead you. It's led me here. The darkness that I was in, and to be able to stand here in front of you and jibber-jabber on, is amazing. So keep exploring. Come run with me in my community, Chasing Lights Collective. It's free, it's open. You are all welcome to join us. Come move with us. If you've got any questions at the end, give me a shout. Any questions? Final, quick one? No? You good? We want to go eat now? You're all thinking about those 3 other high-intensity classes that you've now signed up for, haven't you? Guys, thank you very much. Stay blessed. Thank you, 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 thank you.